Welcome to Larking Gowen Insights, accountancy and business advice for all, a series that gives you bite-sized tips and guidance on tax, funding, legislation, reforms and much more. With case studies, business advisory and sector specials and even interviews, our team of experts are committed to helping you navigate the world of accounting and finance with a variety of presenters from across our specialisms. So, let's get on with today's show.
Well, hello. We're talking about VAT on school fees today. We had a budget last week from Rachel Reeves, and we learned a bit more about the government's proposals. My name is Giles Kirkham. I'm delighted to be joined today by Gilly McGill and Tony Lawlor. Gilly will be talking about the new rules. Tony will be talking from the coalface about managing the changes in an education setting. First of all, Gilly, hello.
Hello.
We last spoke in August after the draft legislation came out. Since then, we've had more details from HMRC. We've had the budget on the 30th of October. There were lots of surprises in the budget. I think perhaps there were fewer surprises maybe in around VAT and school fees. Before diving into what the budget did, do you perhaps want to just remind us briefly what we knew before last week and what we were hoping to hear?
Yeah, absolutely, Giles. So back in the summer, as you say, when you and I last spoke, we had some draft legislation and guidance notes issued by HM Revenue and Customs, which confirmed that VAT would be applied to private schools with respect to their education and boarding provision, and that the effective date of that change was going to be the 1st of January 2025. Now, that date was the most problematic part of this change, to be fair. And since we last spoke, we've had conversations with HMRC, by lots of the industry bodies and by the professional bodies as well. And we have also had over 17,500 responses to the HMRC consultation on that legislative change. So we were hopeful, because I rather suspect that probably 17,500 of those responses were asking for a deferral for when this would come into effect. And we were hopeful that maybe that would be announced in the budget, but alas, no. We still have this 1st of January 2025 live date for the change to take effect, which is obviously partway through an academic year. So maximum difficulty in implementing that for schools.
And what did we get, Gilly?
We had a few clarifications and perhaps a concession as well in response to the discussions that we've been having with HMRC. So one of the biggest problems that we had in the draft legislation in the summer was that it had been suggested that a nursery class that consisted of even one child who would achieve compulsory school age at any point in the academic year would render the entire class subject to VAT. That seemed quite draconian. It doesn't really fit with the structure that private schools operate with respect to nurseries and pre-prep. And HMRC have responded to those concerns. And so now, with this legislation that we had released on the 30th of October, nursery classes can be almost wholly children under compulsory school age. So where that sits is a bit of a grey area, but we have got a little bit of wiggle room there now, which is very welcome. We've also had confirmation that teaching English as a foreign language will remain VAT exempt. That wasn't clear previously, and that brings private schools to remain in the same status as commercial providers of English as a foreign language. So again, that's quite welcome as well. We've had a bit more clarification of how much VAT on costs that were incurred pre-registration can be recovered. Good to have the clarification that we can get some VAT back in our first return for those earlier expenditure, but not quite the detail that you might hope for, but still a little bit of movement, which is helpful. And then the other big change for lots of private schools is the removal of rates relief, which will come in next spring. And the legislation we had last week confirmed that rates relief will remain for special schools, which again is a really positive response to some of the consultation and conversations that we've been having with HMRC.
So we've had some useful news for nurseries. We've had some useful news for SEN settings. Are we going to get more news?
I think now we're in a position where we've got everything we're going to get.
For VAT?
Yes, for VAT, we've got everything that we're going to get. Rates, as I say, will be legislated with effect from the spring, so that detailed legislation will come, in the next following months. But on the VAT front, we've got what we've got now. That's probably it for the time being. We need to work with what we've got and accept that there are some areas of uncertainty and there are grey areas, and those will not necessarily be ironed out until we've had some HMRC compliance checks of schools when they start to submit VAT returns, which is not the greatest position to be in, but I think that is pragmatically where we are right now.
So what pragmatically, what are schools doing now?
Well, they need to start thinking about when they've got to VAT register from. Because although this change comes in with effect from the 1st of January, if they're receiving fees now in November or in December 2024 that are actually for the January 25 term, that may well mean that they have to apply to VAT register earlier. So they need to be really on top of that. They need to know when they're receiving payments in advance for the January term and get their VAT registration application in. And they also need to be making sure that their systems and their accounting data has got sufficient information for them to be able to start preparing VAT returns, particularly with respect to costs and capturing costs and the VAT that they've incurred on costs, and being able to in some way attribute it to what they do that is standard rated so that they can recover that VAT and maximise that claim.
Okay, thanks, Gilly. Hello, Tony.
Thanks, Giles. Hello.
Hello. We go way back. But you have had lots of roles in the education system. But you're also particularly experienced in change management. Just to introduce you to people who don't know you, I think you sort of, at the moment, you're working as an FD, a fractional financial director, particularly helping small and medium-sized enterprises. Is that right?
That's correct, Giles, yeah.
What would you say to bursars and finance lead? I mean, having heard all that Gilly says about the changes, and it seems like we know all we're going to know about the VAT, how the VAT works for a while. What would you like to say to bursars and finance leads at private schools?
First and foremost, right of this. There's a lot. This is a huge change for the sector. But very little has been said about the bursars. A lot has been said about the legal case. A lot has been said about the parents, the students, the trustees, and the HMRC. But very little has been said about the bursars or the finance leads. And a lot of bursars don't have the financial technical knowledge. They come from a banking or a military background. And this is a huge change. This is unbelievable change in a short period of time. VAT is complex, but don't be afraid of it. At the end of the day, it's only 9 boxes to fill in a VAT return. 2 of the boxes are just subtotals, and 2 of the boxes you won't be doing because one relates to Northern Ireland. So it's very much just fill in the boxes. Don't be afraid of partial exemption. Very few people understand partial exemption. It's something you can adjust. And just be conscious when you send in your VAT return, you can always retrospectively change it or make amendments. They're not going to be perfect, the first wave of VAT returns. This is not perfect. The HMRC don't fully understand education, because if they did, they would have brought this in on the 1st of September. That's a fact. Schools are complex. I mean, they have about 40 or 50 different revenue streams, a type of revenue streams, and the bursar and the finance teams are going to have to go through each line and basically say which is in and which is out. Is it 100% in or 100% out? And do an exercise. And this is going to drag on for 2 or 3 years, like Gillian has said. Well, it's smoothed out, the various bits and pieces. I mean, the fees are the fees, but all the other additional school trips, accommodation, food, disbursements, bursaries, all these things are going to take time to iron out.
Are they going to be doing it with the same team they've got now? Do they need extra resource?
I think they're going to need extra resource, and this brings us back to what Gillian says about systems. I don't believe the current systems private schools use are going to be up to the purpose. They're very niche. You don't get automatic bank feeds very well. It's back to CSV files. They don't connect very well to making tax digital. The cost of the schools about 10 to 15 grand a year, and then they have a procurement system costing another 10 or 15,000 pounds a year. At the end of the day, I mean, the HMRC and the government have decided that schools are now businesses, they're now commercial entities, and schools have got bursars have got to start thinking and acting like this. And I would be inclined to say that they should look to move away from current systems and look to embrace Xero, QuickBooks, Free Agent, which are a lot better, they're a lot cheaper. They connect with apps so much easier, whether it's Dext and HubDoc for scanning documents, Fusely for forecasting, Chaser for debt collection. They're just much more up to date, much more better dashboards, better reporting, better forecasting. So basically, yes, they should look to move systems, in my opinion, to something more commercial, which will be cheaper, but I think it'll give them a better reporting, better dashboards, and better systems, and much easier for auditing point of view.
Okay. You got some thoughts on the year end as well, haven't you?
Bit more controversial, and Gillian might pick up on this. When they start the VAT cycle from January, the first 1 week from January to March, so this will automatically mean they're out of kilter with their year end, whether that's July or August. My argument is such that they should look to move their year end till the end of December for a number of reasons. Schools will be setting their budget each April at the moment, but in April, you don't know, and it's even made worse. You don't know what the national minimum wage is going to be. You don't know what's going to come up in the budget in October. You don't know how many students are going to come through your door in September. So why not change that till the end of December? Do your budget in September, October. Do your annual accounts in the spring term. Take some of the pressure off yourselves. It'll make it easier for the going concern conversation. And it's just so you'll have a 17 or 18 month period. But this next couple of months is going to be total chaos and carnage for bursars, let's be honest. So buy yourself some time. There's nothing in legislation that says you can't do it. It's an operational decision. And I just think be brave. And the only difference is the holiday accrual as far as I can see, because you are very much a business now and it's only just apportionment.
I think that's interesting, Tony. I think it would be brave and it would be novel to move away from the academic year, but certainly I can see the pragmatic reasons you're talking about. Gilly, do you want to come back in on that about because certainly whether or not you change the year at the financial year end, and I think most people won't, but maybe some will, there's a VAT year end as well, isn't there?
Yeah, there is a VAT year end, which is what Tony's alluding to. So if you don't do anything else, your VAT year end always ends on March, April, or May, whichever one of those you have a VAT quarter end that ends on. So, like you say, Tony, if you're registering with effect from the 1st of January, if you don't do anything else, you're likely to be put on a March stagger. So your VAT year end will be March, which won't correlate with anything that the organisation is doing for any other reason. However, when you apply for your VAT registration, it's possible to request what's called a non-standard VAT year. And that's by email to the HMRC VAT registration unit. So I would definitely be recommending that you request a non-standard VAT year that ties in with your financial year end, whether you choose to change it or whether you choose to keep it as it currently is. But it will make life a bit easier when it comes to doing your annual adjustment for VAT purposes, because you'll be using the same data that you're using for your statutory accounts.
We've had quite a good go at the VAT there. Is there anything else practically that either you want to say about?
I do have a question about this, Gillian. A lot of schools have changed ownership in the last 5 or 6 years. Are they going to be in a position to be able to claim back the VAT since the invoices are with the previous owners as such, who might no longer be in existence, change names or whatever?
That is an excellent question, Tony. It's certainly going to cause problems. So, yeah, this pre-registration VAT on costs that can be recovered. We've got 6 months that you can go back for services. Now, they're probably going to be in the right name because it's only 6 months ago. Then we've got 4 years that we can go back for goods. They may well be in the right name, might not be. So that's definitely going to need to be thought about. And then we've got the capital goods scheme, which can go back 10 years. And the chances of, well, anybody, whether they've had a change of ownership or not, having those invoices, I think is quite slim. Now, the conversations that I've been able to be involved with HMRC on this, they've said that they'll take a fairly relaxed approach to needing to have the invoices. Whether that will come through in the proof of the pudding whenever you get an HMRC VAT check remains to be seen, but they're not necessarily going to insist you've got an invoice for that spend in your name going back all those years.
Is that your answer, Tony?
Well, it's all the more reason to make sure their fixed asset register is up to date and is right.
Absolutely.
Yeah, this is going to be an interesting one.
It's going to be an interesting period. Rates. Do you want to just say something on rates, Gilly?
Yeah, so we know that the charitable relief for rates has been already removed for schools in Scotland, and that's been the case for a while now. We know that they will be removed for schools in England with effect from next April. That's April 2025, although, as I said before, we don't have detail of that as yet. But there is still time. There is time to think about whether you might be able to speak to your local authority about getting some of their discretionary relief that they will still have the power to give to charitable schools. And also, lots of the recommendations out there are to make sure that you have got valuations that are up to date and representative of the current buildings that you've got on your site, because a lot of those may not be completely up to date. And I think, Giles, you were making the point when we spoke before about having an obligation to notify any material changes in the valuation anyway. So it's definitely worth looking at that if you haven't got something fairly current.
Yeah, but we don't know when we're going to get the detail. Other than the fact that we know it's starting in April, we don't know anything else, do we?
No,
not at all.
No. Other than the fact that special schools will still get the relief, which is good.
Good. Right, Gilly, you're running VAT training for fee charging schools on the 12th of November. So I think very much anyone who's interested in this topic is welcome to register for that. The recording will be available on the Larking Gowen website. You will find a link to that recording in the show notes. You will also find their contact details for Tony and for Gilly and for me, so you can follow up with any questions you've got. You'll also find their links to other conversations we've had on VAT and other topics. So we'll leave it there. Have a great day, everyone.
Thank you for joining us for Larking Gowen Insights, Accountancy and Business Advice for All. Don't forget, you can find more information about today's topic and more about how our team of experts can help you in your business by visiting our website, larking-gowen.co.uk. Join us again next time for another fascinating insight into the world of accounting and finance.